Okay, welcome everyone to Coaches Connect by Precision Nutrition. These calls are a combination of Q&A, hot seat coaching by master coaches like myself, expert talks and deep dives, as well as opportunities to practice and apply concepts as you're learning about in your courses, the certifications. So we started these because we know that running a coaching business can be very lonely. So Coaches Connect. I wanted to kick off today with a little bit of a topic. We'll warm up, and I have Coach Jeremy as my co-pilot today, so I'm sure he will pop in and weigh in as well. But I do invite you to use chat to raise hand feature. This is not meant to be a monologue. Please goodness no. This is going to be a dialogue. This is very much a live coaching call. I want to think of these as a working space for all of us to connect, to workshop through things. And we're also coming into here as peers, right? So some of us will have more experience than others, but nevertheless, we are all showing up here as coaches. So it's not just me or Coach Jeremy who is here to coach you. We're all here to coach each other. We're all here to share the perspectives. Cool. I will hop into chat here just to make sure that I'm not missing any questions. So the topic I wanted to kick us off today is actually group coaching. So all things group coaching offers, group coaching pricing. How is group coaching different from one-on-one coaching? This is probably one of the big things I see with coaches, and we can kind of go down this rabbit hole quite a bit where we're really trying to deliver a one-on-one coaching experience in a group setting, which can be difficult. So Coach Jeremy, I'll pick on you because I can. Would you care to tell us a little bit more about your perspective on group coaching versus one-on-one? And I will mute myself because there's a lawnmower.
Yeah, I mean, we scheduled that emergency lawn mowing session that you required so desperately at an excellent time. Uh, my perspective from sitting in as a group coach in PNC, which is our PN coaching program, where we typically have numbers between 150 up to 500 clients at a time, and also delivering one-on-one coaching for PN and for myself, is that in a group coaching model, we're typically trying to deliver a pretty standard curriculum to folks, and then helping them to interpret and adapt it so that it fits their needs. Whereas one-on-one tends to be very much choose your own adventure, and being able to forge a closer relationship with clients. As much as we want to personalize the approach in group coaching and be able to pick out shining spots to highlight individual people's coaching journeys and help create that connection, one-on-one is much more driven by that communication that I have with clients.
So I'm curious for folks of you here on the call, if you can pop into chat or feel free to raise your hand and just unmute. I would love to hear, where are you at when it comes to one-on-one coaching or group coaching? And I really want you to answer that from any perspective. Maybe as a recipient, maybe you have been enrolled in group coaching. Go ahead and feel free to answer it as a coach as well. Maybe you are currently offering some group coaching or one-on-one. So give me a little bit of context of like what kind of mix of expertise and experience we have here when it comes to one-on-one coaching versus group. And I'll go first. My very first experience with group coaching, my very first experience with coaching period, was enrolling in Precision's Nutrition's PN coaching for women many years ago. That was a 12 months program. I have never had a coach before. I've never been in athletics when I was younger, so I didn't have like a soccer coach. So believe me, when I actually had a coach, I sounded like a 6-year-old who's in love with their teacher and they wouldn't stop talking about them. Like, oh my God, Miss Simpson again, Miss Simpson this, Miss Simpson that. So it was, my coach said this, my coach said that. Well, my coach says. So it was such an eye-opening experience for me. And since then, I have enrolled in multiple group coaching programs. one-on-one coaching programs, and I've also obviously led both one-on-one and group coaching sessions myself. So what about the rest of you? Keisha, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, so me and my husband have a business, and we do like a 21-day program, and we offer one-on-one coaching. So we do both. So we do it. I do the coaching for about maybe half an hour if it's one-on-one, and I follow they're pretty much the rubric that we learned here at Precision Nutrition. And then with group coaching, we also do group coaching as well. So we do that about once a week, um, with the group over the 21 days, and we use it. We kind of do a round robin with people to see how we're fasting, so to see how people are doing on their fast. And then if there's something that kind of sticks out to me, where I can go in a little bit deeper with someone, if they're having some issues or they're struggling a little bit, I kind of go in and go in a little bit deeper with the questions, and pretty much go back to again what we learned here at Precision Nutrition. And I use it as an opportunity for everyone to learn from that person's experience. So we go down, even though I work with one person, it's for everyone. And so I acknowledge that too, and I say, hey, I'm not just talking to this one person. I'm talking where it's something for everyone to learn from as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Keisha. I appreciate your sharing. And I think like that, one of the most powerful aspects of group coaching is something that you have mentioned, right? Like it's that hearing somebody else share a particular experience, you actually realizing you're not alone. I think that's very powerful. And like think of this space as group coaching of sorts. So like we're all here together, right? In a group, it's being facilitated. There's always going to be that one-on-one where one person is speaking. Maybe there's a coaching interaction. But if you've never been yourself in a group coaching situation, congratulations, now you have. There we go. And I encourage you to pop into chat and take a look at the variety of different experiences and levels of expertise here that we have. So folks that are doing one-on-one in their business for the most part, some people are only doing group, some people are curious about group. Jeremy, what about you? Have you both, I would imagine, both done group coaching and one-on-one coaching?
I have done both. I've received group coaching. Yeah, and I mean, it depends on really like what is the thing that I'm trying to offer and who's the group that I'm trying to address to find best fit. But I believe that they can both be incredibly valuable when done correctly.
Yeah. So when it comes to group coaching versus one-on-one, I'm curious, what are some questions or sticky points that people might have? Like in my experience, when I see nutrition coaches, health coaches who are just starting out, maybe they've completed their nutrition certification. For the most part, I see folks starting with one-on-one, and I think that tends to be the easier way to go, right? Like there's that individualized approach, and you literally have to focus on coaching the person in front of you. And then further down the line, people might get into group coaching and offer something that is going to target it more at like a larger group than just that one individual.
Okay, it's interesting that you bring that up in terms of like one-on-one being an easier pathway. I've seen it kind of from both angles where many folks start with group coaching. I think for the idea that it's like the power of the group, I'll get more feedback more quickly. There's probably pros and cons to both approaches. I would take it in your experience then. Do you feel like group coaching is an easier ask or an easier way to get off the ground? Would that be true?
Oh, you know what? I think, like, as you're speaking, I'm actually making a realization that I think there is a bit of a split of if whether we are starting out primarily in physical movement space or nutrition space. Because I would argue that most of us probably start with group experience when it comes to physical movement. Like think soccer coach, CrossFit class, right? Spin class. Even if you're doing like a fitness class at a gym, you would usually start there, and then maybe you want more personal attention, and then you might like progress, if you will, to working like one-on-one with a personal trainer. With nutrition, I most often see it the other way, where like really just building the business, where people start working one-on-one. And I think that there is some just capacity and bandwidth limitations there. If I'm only starting, I might not have much of an audience, right? Like I'm working on growing my network. I'm working on making sure people around me know what it is I do. So it's much easier for me to start working with people one-on-one at maybe a couple of test case clients. It could be a friend, right? It could be a neighbor that I'm helping them with their nutrition, maybe in exchange for, say, a testimonial, than for me to try and fill a group, right? And that's something that I see coaches struggle with very frequently when it comes to group coaching, is that there is this like terror, like if I launch a group thing, and like what if it doesn't fill, like what if only 2 people register, like then what do I do? And in my head I kind of think like 0 people registering is not the worst case scenario. 1 person registering is the worst case scenario, because now it's like, well, this is not a group, what the heck do I do with that, right? Like, so when I mentor coaches through like structuring their group offer, we usually talk about setting 3 numbers for the goals. So where for the group coaching, we talk about the minimum number to run, and that number could be 2. That number could be 3, 4, right? Like it's usually single digits of some kind, like absolute minimum to run. If you have that many, that group is running. And then we might talk, like if your number is, let's say 3, like my minimum number to run is 3. We will talk very, very explicitly about what will you do if only 2 people enroll. Okay, so, and usually I suggest we have, an email communication drafted to them, and there's usually an offer of some kind. And we can say like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm not actually running this group coaching program. However, I would like to offer you this instead. And it might just be a discounted access to working with you one-on-one. Right? Now, we hope that actually doesn't happen if we want to launch a group thing, but simply having that very, very detailed plan goes a very long way in just making someone feel very calm as they're trying to fill the group coaching offer. And then so we have 1 number that is a minimum to run. Then we have like a decent number that kind of is like, yes, I'm content with this. And then there's another goal that is like, I'm buying a lake house. Well, or your version of lake house. I'm buying a treadmill. Buy myself something nice. Goal. So, or you can think of it as, ABC goal, right? Like however you want to call your levels. How does that sound? Like, has anyone used that approach before? And if you haven't, is this something that feels helpful? So Hema says, I've used that with group classes. Yeah. Lisa says, I found the group coaching in the gym could get chaotic because people were often way too involved in chatting with others and not paying attention to the workout sessions. But the camaraderie can be incredible because the relationships are established. Yes, for sure. No, no, it's going once, going twice in group coaching. The other common question that I see when it comes to group coaching specifically is, how do I make sure to customize the approach in a group, right? So for example, if I'm putting together a nutrition curriculum for a group coaching offer, like how do I, some people really might need to focus on sleep first and others might need to focus on protein first, right? Like how do I make sure that everybody kind of gets what they need? And now it's just that they don't, because that's the group coaching versus one-on-one. In terms of how we make those decisions, I usually suggest that we have a very, very specific person in mind. That can be a real person or it can be a made up person, but I want you to kind of think of a very, very specific, perfect client person. And then you build the course or curriculum or order of habits in ProCoach geared towards that person, knowing that it won't be the perfect accommodation to 10 people in your group. But if we wanted the perfect customization, then we would probably want them to be in one-on-one, right? Yeah, so Renee says, I've had less than expected join. So I would have had a friend, family member join to get me up to the minimum. Yeah, and I think that's a great approach, right? So one of the things that I've talked about in the past, like what are a couple of strategies, like if I have my open period, right? Like I'm enrolling people in my group and that number is not where I want it to be. There are a couple of things we can do. And Renee mentioned one of them is we could invite some family and friends, kind of like freebie members, to contribute to the group, to actually make a group a group. I really like the reaching out to former clients, assuming you have former clients, obviously, and offering them to join at a heavy discount, kind of as another version, right, like of helping you make that group a group. And also just extending the enrollment period, right? And kind of like making sure being very consistent or even more consistent than you have been in your communications about the group offer, right? So it's like, well, how many times did I mention this group offer really? In my email, on my social media platform, you better not tell me once. You better not tell me it was once, and you better not tell me it was 3 times either, right? Like it's gotta be like we have talked about this consistently again and again to our people, and still not as many as I would have liked join. I might suggest pushing everything out by a week and then refocusing on consistency. Okay. I'll pause here just to see if there are any questions about kind of group coaching, one-on-one coaching specifically. Pop them up in the chat or or raise your hand in Zoom. And I'll pop over to Jer meanwhile, just to kind of check if you had any thoughts, contributions, and gems.
Yeah, so one thing as I'm listening to this, the idea of a minimum number, what factors come up for you as a minimum number? Besides like making this not a pain in the butt, like you mentioned, like one person signing up would be less than ideal, because I assume that there's a structure that benefits multiple people. And if one person does, it's like, I probably don't need multiple group calls per week. I probably don't need to have a conversation on a Facebook group for one person. Like that might be a little bit overkill.
Yeah.
But like what factors into your minimum number?
How would you answer that question, Jer?
You coaching me right now. So I've had experiences where it's like you're brought in to have a presentation for like a group of people and like practice all night, have handouts for the people, have examples and stuff, and then had 2 people show up to that presentation. In that moment, I was like, well, I probably don't need my slides and I don't need to have handouts, or maybe I can, but I can hand them out later. But in the moment I thought, okay, it's like in this conversation, like, let's just make it a straight conversation. Let's sit down, and then that's how I can offer more value here. I probably don't need a 45-minute presentation of me monologuing for these 2 people. I can just ask them, hey, what do you need support with? What are you working on right now? and then I can point you to the right direction from there. That felt like the way that I can offer the best value there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm curious how folks on the call would go about this as well. Like if you were coming up with a minimum number to run, how would you go about it? And we can distinguish a couple of things here because, like, let's say if I'm running a nutrition webinar at a local gym and it's scheduled for 10 a.m., right? And I'm prepping for it, kind of like what Jeremy was talking about, and I show up and there's only 2 people there, well, I'm probably not going to turn around and leave. Like, too bad there are 2 people there. We're doing the webinar or the seminar for 2 people. If I've already been paid maybe to do a talk, right? Like it doesn't matter if 0 people show up. Well, actually, if 0 people show up is great because I've already been paid for the talk. I can go home. But I think it's more in the context of I am running a thing and we're maybe going to have group coaching calls every week for 6 weeks. How do I go about coming up with that minimum number? Well, I would argue that for me there are a couple of things there. I might want the experience of running the group, period. Even if it's actually not worth it money-wise. But even for me to go down that path, it actually has to be a group. Because if only one person enrolls, I can run the thing for 6 weeks. I'm not getting group coaching experience. I'm getting one-on-one coaching experience. Right? So it just might be that. How many people should enroll? What's the minimum to run? Maybe it's 2, but then we have to consider the fact that usually not every single person will show up to every single call. For me to end up with 2 people showing up consistently to calls, I probably need 5 people enrolled. If 5 enroll, I will reasonably expect 2 at least to show up. To give you an idea, we have 34 people on the call right now. 77 RSVP'd. Right? So, and I mean, that sounds like a pretty good split. Like we're usually expecting somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of people to show up. Sometimes 2/3, right? Like if it's a really expensive thing that we're doing, right? And we enrolled and we're really going to make sure we're there. And it's going to be less so for a free thing always, just in terms of like our own skin in the game. And then as we go further down, as we get coaching experience, we might very much use some financial tangible goals, right? Like I need for this group coaching session, pay me at least $100 an hour, right? Or $200 an hour. Needing to consider prep time in that time. Right? So if all of my clients together, if I have 5 people enroll and they each are paying me $20, right? And I'm making 100, that actually might not be enough if I'm spending 4 hours prepping, right? So we could use some financial goals. Like I want to be able to make at least this much in order for me to run this group.
Yeah, that was something that I was hoping that you'd bring up in that equation as well. And it's good to see you being doing your Kickstarter homework, so that's good. Understanding kind of what is the financial benefit of running the group format versus the overall preparation and the amount of work that it would take. Sometimes it's not worth it to run with a number that is below your minimum. So that can factor in as well to understanding like, hey, is this the thing that I want it to be right now?
And
or do I pause this group and postpone, build a little bit more hype, and then come back later?
It does bring up a point of how we do the math as well, right? Because I would argue that we do have to take into account all of the work, right? And that would apply to both group coaching and one-on-one coaching. So if I'm working with a one-on-one client, like how much time am I spending, not just on coaching calls, but also on putting together their program, reviewing their emails, responding to their emails, keeping in touch, researching a thing for them, for their specific situation, whether they even know about that or not. Like all of that is going to be part of the coaching work. Okay. Well, there was my little TED talk, so thank you for coming to that. But I do want to shift gears a little bit and open up the space for more of a Q&A. And we had a question, so feel free if you have a question, pop it into a chat or again, use the raise hand feature. I have seen Christina pop in here with a question, and then I saw Keisha raise her hand. So we'll go to Christina and then Keisha, and then keep them coming. So Christina is asking, I would really appreciate your help with something. I've been thinking about how I can be more open and receptive to feedback, especially when things are a bit intense. It's something I've been working on, and I'd love to get your insights or any recommended literature you think you could help. And Hema specified like feedback from clients, peer feedback, and I think it's more receiving feedback when it comes from my boss. So from maybe your boss, your manager, your direct superior. And Christina saying, I have a tendency to take it personally. And Christina, I have a feeling you're not alone here, because it doesn't necessarily have to be your boss. I think like when somebody gives you a piece of feedback and we take it personally, that's pretty common, right? And I'm wondering, Christina, are you on the call? Are you somewhere where you can jump on?
Yes. Yes, you're absolutely right. I talked to my boyfriend about this. I talked to my two best friends about that, and my boyfriend's response was, well, yeah, you're tough on being receptive to feedback, but most of the times you ended up being right. So I don't know how to say it. So that was his response. And then my two best friends, who knows me for at least a decade, said that if the constructive criticism is delivered from the perspective of almost like being a little more accusive, right? If it's a little aggressive, then I have a tendency to like, that's not fair. That's not right. You can't like accuse me in like doing this. Like that's my immediate response. And I can't control how people deliver the feedback, but I can control how I take it. So, and I had like a pretty crucial conversation with my boss, who actually did say that that's my only con that she's having issues with, is like every time I bring up something, it sounds like there's always like an argument, and kind of give me feedback to work on it. So I told her I'm going to bring it up, and I saw the email that the coaching calls are back, and I was like, well, if I get an opportunity, I will get some information, advice, and hopefully some help on how I can get better at this, because I hear it frequently. It's something I need to work on.
Would you be able to give us like a little bit of a specific example? Like I have a feeling that there are a number of situations there that kind of have occurred over time. So what would be like a small example that you'd feel comfortable sharing?
The specific example would be what got me like really upset and emotional, and I didn't take it very well during that conversation that happened last week, was when the boss, instead of saying, well, it seems like, so it was about the client who was not happy about how I handled the conversation. The boss followed up with the client. We got the constructive criticism from the client, what could be done better. And during that discussion, she made the comment saying, well, that's probably why we're losing people, right? So it's like, I'm like, whoa, right? So immediately, like in my head, it's like, what? So I did not obviously take it well. That phrase really got to me, because I think I've got like 3-4 complaints in the last 2 years, right? So it's kind of those kind of accusive comments made me feel very bad. And I explained to her, I was like, well, I probably, if your constructive criticism could be a little bit more inviting to discuss this instead of like accusing me, I would be like, find it very helpful. So that was a specific example. So I don't know if I took it too personally, but I think I did actually. No, let me rephrase that. I did take it very personally, but I also think there's something that she could have done better too in terms of delivering that feedback. So that's the specific example.
Can you tell us what you mean when you say I took it personally?
I guess it's almost like insult of me. Like you're saying that we're losing people because of me. That's not fair.
Why is it not fair?
Because we didn't lose the people because of that particular examples we were discussing during that conversation. She more like generalized that instead of staying within the constructive criticism of this particular issue we're discussing.
Yeah, so what she was saying was actually not true.
Correct.
Why did it bother you?
Well, good question, right? Very good question. Why it bothered me, but it did. And quite ironically, Kate, so I've been working with her for 8+ years now. And my colleague, before I moved and started working for her remotely, one of my colleagues actually did say that during our one team outings, when we had a couple drinks and it was a relaxing, atmosphere, he did say, so Christina, she's talking to you way harshly than with anybody else I could pinpoint. So like, she doesn't talk to anybody the same way she talks to you. And that kind of bothered me. Maybe I lingered on it. I don't know. And I couldn't say that to the boss, obviously, it's not very appropriate. So, but that kind of made me, okay, so it's not just me.
Well, it's interesting because as we become coaches and as become better coaches, we become better and better at communicating.
I know.
What's a really frustrating thing about that is like the major downside to being a coach who's becoming better and better at communicating, because no one around you is doing the same thing. Right? Like they're not becoming better at communicating at all. And you're becoming more and more acute to when things are communicated to you in an insensitive manner.
Yeah.
Christina, can I ask you, do you work in this relationship that you're mentioning, is this in a coaching field? Just in case, like maybe your boss is a coach and maybe they're here.
No, she.
Okay, cool. Just checking.
I wouldn't think so. Plus, I feel comfortable, I guess. Oh, actually, no, I don't, because the one phrase I did say, I wouldn't want her to know, because again, I don't want to put that colleague in a bad position,
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm gonna double check the windows.
So a couple of things, and like Lisa called this out, right? Like this is absolutely not an easy thing to share. Like this is something that every single person here has experienced, and it's still not easy to actually talk about this. Now, when Christina shared her the initial situation, she actually doesn't specify whether feedback was positive or negative, but we could have implied that, right? Because we usually don't have any issues taking positive feedback personally.
Sure.
And though I would argue that we shouldn't take positive feedback personally either, right? Because it's just a flip side of the same coin, right? Like if I'm going to take all of my clients' wins as my own credit, then when they fail, I take that as my fault as well. So you notice it's really just it's the same thing. So we're really talking about here, like how do we take people's feedback in a way that is helpful? And I think back to my teaching days when I would get my college course evaluations from students, and I would read them and I would say, Kate talks too fast. I cannot follow anything she's saying. And then I would pick up the next course evaluation and it says, Kate is talking way too slowly. Same speed, right? But you notice that it's often much easier to disregard feedback that is that mixed and that inconsistent. It's usually when we get negative feedback that is kind of persistent and maybe is starting to pinpoint at some of the things we ourselves are concerned about, something that is kind of hitting us in a sensitive spot somewhere. That's when we start taking it, quote unquote, personally, right? And I think, Christina, one way we can sort of think of it, like when I take something personally, it hurts.
Yep. I got really emotional. We talked again on Saturday and I got emotional, and my response was not professional that day. And we did talk like on yesterday, I was much better, more productive. And that's when I told her that I'm willing to work on this and that I have this call and I'm gonna, advise and see what feedback I will get, because I want to get better. Like it's not,
Yeah, I talk of two characteristics of, super coaches, right? How is a super coach different from a regular coach? A super coach is aligned and regulated, aligned to your values and regulated within your emotional experiences. So what you're talking about is an unregulated response to something, right? Like to a piece of feedback in a work environment, which I know I've experienced, bursting into tears in a work meeting. Not something I would like to do ever again or on
No.
any sort of regular basis, right? So it's really like your observation, but it's not really the feedback, it's the fact of how feedback lands on me
Yeah.
and leading to an unregulated response from me, which then leads to, appearing unprofessional in the workplace and whatever else that might be.
Yep.
I'm curious if folks here have like feedback or thoughts for Christina. Yeah, so Hima is saying, what else was going on? Like you may have been tired at the time, so it's harder to filter the reactions. Yeah, you know that T-shirt, if you've ever seen it, like, please forgive me for all the things I said when I was hungry.
Yeah. Good one. I was not hungry that day, but good one.
That's a fantastic question, right? Like what else was going on, right? So I think, like Christina, I think negative feedback, however constructive it might be, I think it's hard to take on a good day, right? But unless you're regularly bursting into tears, it also might have been the set of circumstances on that day as well, right? Like, so whether you were extra tired at the time, whether you were maybe hungry at the time. Lisa's saying, as coaches, we're so trained in active listening, giving feedback, and lots of other tools. We wish others were trained that way too, and they're definitely not. So, yeah, in this case, Christina, what would you say to a friend who has experienced something similar? Lisa, I love that question.
Well, actually, it's funny because when I talked to my two best friends, and that's what they said, Christina, you would need to be able to be objective and kind of like take your emotions out of the situation and keep it just to the on a business level, right? So, okay, like, yes, it's their problem how they deliver the feedback, but it's your responsibility to take it constructively, kind of thing. So I guess I would say the same thing to a friend. That's what I should have done. I didn't, but I should have.
Well, can I offer a reframe?
Of course.
Should have is rarely helpful, but will do can be.
Absolutely, yes. And that's why I'm open to, I do find reading books about, like I read books about communication because again, this is my second language. So I feel like it's an ongoing work. Yeah. So, and that's another feedback I would get from her a couple years in. Now my English much better than it was 8 years ago. So I would get that one of the feedback that the communication, because there's a lot going into it. It's not just the language, but also the culture, right? I would get a feedback that sometimes because of my directness, I can come across a little aggressive,
Yeah.
even though I don't mean that way. So it's like there are a lot of little things that comes to and I found literature very helpful because it gives me a better perspective because it's written by American, like English spoken people, right? So it's helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and I agree. I think that there might be a cultural aspect to this as well, because I know that my background is Russian, and like I would say, my parents are significant. Like my parents were older, obviously, when we immigrated, and I know that it's very common for my parents to be perceived as very blunt, right? Where they're really just doing a literal translation of Russian to English, and that's how you would say it, right? Like where, like in Russian, you will say, give me the salt. In English, that sounds incredibly rude because you're supposed to say, would you mind passing me the salt?
Yeah.
If I were to translate it in my language, that makes no sense, right? Like, would you mind? No, I don't mind giving you this. It's like, no, just give me the salt. Actually, right. So I think that's a great point as well, Christina. Thank you so much for bringing this forward. I'm gonna shift gears and go to Keisha and then Miriam. Keisha, go ahead.
Yeah, that was a really great, conversation between, Tate and Christina. And Christina, I just to, offer you something too. I had been called, still every once in a while, but called very aggressive too. And I was taking a leadership course, and it kind of came full front in front of my face, and I had to do something about it. And what I learned to do, and it took a minute because I had to recognize when it happened. What I end up doing was learning to take a breath. If someone said something, let me lower my hand because it's giving me a little notification. I took a breath. I may have even in that moment, closed my eyes for a second, maybe, put my head down maybe a little bit, but at least took a breath before I spoke. And then I would ask a question. I would say, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or ask them, well, what do you mean by that? Or what is that? What is that? What is that? What can you tell me a little bit more, why or what that feedback was? And that calmed me down, because then I could understand, okay, well, where was that person coming from? And then I could take my time to, to respond and say, oh, okay, well, maybe they just didn't hear what I said. And maybe I just need to raise my voice a little bit, and it could be something very, innocuous, like that, somebody isn't hearing me, correctly or something like that. So it's not, necessarily you necessarily, but, or not your tone necessarily. It could be just, a little thing that you may need to change. So I take a breath and I say, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Can you expand upon that? What did that person tell you? And honestly, too, just like you said, Christina, you can't change the way someone gives you, that feedback. But if by doing those things and taking a breath and, asking more questions, you have the ability, and people can actually change how they respond to you when you take a breath and ask questions, and they'll see how you're adjusting as well, and they may even adjust to how you're adjusting and mirror you. So that was that. So the question that I did have, you're welcome. The question that I did have is, I find, some of my clients, they're doing so well in their own work. It's almost like I'm not needed. So sometimes I find myself maybe stretching a call throughout the 30 minutes. They're expecting a 30-minute call. I find myself stretching a 30-minute call, because it's kind of like, oh, you did that great. And they want to continue doing the action items that they were doing for the last month. And they want to continue that, want to do anything more. They're doing really well. So I'm like, I want to continue having you as a client, but I don't know what kind of feedback to give them.
Yeah, Heather, I want to hear more from you. That is such a great. Is that okay? Say
No.
more. Say more. You can
No, I
always
mean,
say no.
that's exciting. And it always is my goal that people don't need to be in coaching maybe with me forever. So maybe you can move them into something that has less time per contact, or something that's more of like a maintenance or continuity model.
Yes, we're
And
at
make
that
room
point.
for
Yeah.
people who do need that extra amount of time and high touch when they're getting started and they're not on cruise control. I don't know.
Got it. That's really good. 'Cause
Congratulations on all your clients going awesome.
I thanks.
And it's interesting. We say like, what a great problem to have, because it is, right? And I usually add a little tail, because whenever we utter the words like, what a great problem it is to have, And yet it is a problem, right? That Keisha is experiencing. So, and I think this is such a great input from Heather and Keisha. I'm also thinking there are a couple of assumptions that might be at play here as well. So, for example, with a coaching call, that I think a very, very common assumption on behalf of both coaches and clients is that the coaching call has to last however long it lasts, right? So the coaching call needs to be as long as it needs to be. It doesn't need to be 45 minutes. Just like I don't need to finish what's on my plate if I'm full, right? Like the 45-minute time cutoff is not a boss of me. So if we are done 20 minutes in, then we might be done 20 minutes in. And that's something that kind of takes input from both a coach and a client to normalize that, right? Like whether that is even at the beginning where, coaching call might be, maybe your coaching calls need to be half as long. If you usually set aside 45 minutes, they might actually be 20 minutes, and then you book a 30 for yourself, knowing they can always go a little bit more. Right? But again, like that suggests that there might be some tweaking even from the business logistical point of view there, right? So just normalizing like that very fact. Jer says, if I call the plumber and pay for 1 hour, but they fix an issue in 5 minutes, we don't need to hang out. Oh, it's amazing. Thank you for that. Goodness. Oh, Keisha, does that help?
Yes, very much so. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll have another little tidbit for you that I've used with clients who, like, sometimes they get on a call and they're like, it's all good. I'm doing well. I'm doing my workouts. I'm doing my habits. It's amazing. My weight's down. My muscles are up. It's amazing. This is like 3 minutes in, okay? Like 3. And I say, okay, let's plan for Christmas. Because that is always an option, right? Like, so for clients that are doing really, really well, now we don't need to fix things just out of spite, right? But if they're in a space where, like, listen, we have this space right now, you are doing well, you're flowing, things are working, maybe you have some extra time, you're feeling amazing, let's plan for a shit show that will invariably be Christmas, because it always is. Let's get Halloween costumes in July. Let's buy Christmas presents for Aunt Sarah and Susan and all the aunts, right? Like, so we can actually do that. We can start planning for some frozen meals for absolutely no reason, because there will be a need for frozen meals. Because all the kids will be sick all at the same time in 3 weeks. All right, so that's another little, like, we do emergency planning then. For what? We don't know, but it will come. Jared says, if they're a soccer fan, then we can hang with the plumber. Cecil actually called something out to the earlier thing you brought up, Keisha, and I really wanted to call it out. She said, women are also expected to kneecap sentences a lot of the times. So the rude piece and the aggressive piece, there is very often a gender piece to it. Ask me how many times I've been called aggressive. Or what I've started hearing more so recently is spicy, because it's more social. It sounds nicer, right? It's like, ooh, you're spicy. And I started saying, am I spicy, or just happen to have a direct opinion? Like, right? Like that not particularly spicy. I just have an opinion. I think that's a great point, Cethel, as well. So I think that might be a play sometimes. Just vocal. Yes. Hello. Miriam.
Hey, thank you. I was taking notes on Keisha's. I love that comment. Can you tell me more about that? And taking a breath before, I was thinking that might work in personal relationships, like within the family. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm writing that one down. But my question, I was wondering if the people who are work for PN, if they could do a little quick sales pitch for PN2 on how much is the one-on-one coaching there, as far as one-on-one coaching on how to be a coach. You know,
Ooh.
what versus group coaching, you know, how
Before, Miriam, before we do that, I just want to hear folks here on the call if there are any level 2 grads here. Because Jer and I can sales pitch it all we want, but I actually would argue that hearing from Lisa, Hema, Heather, Keisha would be more powerful. Would you agree, or would you rather, because then they can maybe speak to that a little bit, and then Jer and I can fill in the gaps. Is that fair? Cool. Hema, are you in a place where you can unmute?
Yeah, I can.
So tell us more. How was level 2 for you?
Level 2, I always gave this example during level 2 too, is that level 1 is like reading a textbook on surgery or something very complicated, or being an astronaut. Level 2 is like people in the business who have coached hundreds of clients actually holding your hand and leading you through how to perform, very complicated surgery, and you're going to get it. And then they're around for the rest of the time so that when you go do your own surgery, they'll help you. I mean, I just put that level in because when I say coaching, people, will think about their own. But if you want to go a level higher on your experience level, sounds very complicated if I say, something that requires a lot of skill. So level 2, the things that you learn require so much more skill. It's almost like a whole universe opens up. And at the end, if you don't say, oh my God, at some point in the thing, it's just, I won't believe that. I will, bet that even in your first week, you're going to say, oh my God, that's the answer to all my questions. I can really do this, and so it just opens up your ability, your skill level to a whole, just a different ball game. It's like you're playing with the majors. It's just totally different. So that's my 2 cents of comments on that.
Amazing. Thank you, Hema. Thanks for that. There are a couple of level 2 grads chiming in the chat as well. Miriam, I guess my question to you would be, are there any specific questions that you might have about level 2? That between the grads and PN peeps, we can definitely help answer for you.
I was just wondering, like right now I'm in women coaching for women, and I know like I'm one of, several hundred, but in PN2, I was just wondering if there'd be more one-on-one experience in that.
So I'm curious to hear from folks that have
coaching. Yeah.
done it more recently.
Not necessarily coaching myself, but, having my,
So what I'm hearing is, are there opportunities to work with a coach one-on-one in level 2? Is that what you're asking, Miriam?
As far as being coached on how to coach, is it more one-on-one experience or group coaching experience on being on coaching? That's, I guess, what I was asking.
Yeah. So
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. Can somebody who's done it more recently, like the new iteration, I think, Lisa, you said you've done both, right? Can you speak a little bit to that piece? And I see Hema has her hand up as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the first cohort, it was all online at your own pace and all that. With these, you have to show up every week, especially if you're going for the MBHWC exam. You have to show up every week, and you get put into small groups. So generally, it's 2 to 3 people in a group, but you definitely get to practice your skills in those groups. With sometimes you have coaches who are newer, who maybe aren't as experienced. Sometimes you're in a group with coaches who are super experienced, and you really can sort of, like, they've been doing it for a while, and you can really see that they've been doing it for a while. But you also really get the chance to practice your skills in those groups, no matter the experience of the other people in those groups. You really get the experience. And then you do get the mentoring with the most incredible coaches in the business. I mean, with Tony and Jay and Dom, they don't come any better. They're just top notch. So yeah, I felt like the second cohort, the second time I did it, was just a game changer for me. I felt like the first one was too, but this one was just a whole nother level.
Thank you, Lisa. Jackie, go ahead.
There's also live office hours in the new L2 that are optional that you can pop into, and each of the master coaches, Tony, Jason, and Dom, they each have their own office hour every week. So you can pop in if you have your own questions about coaching specific, like to your business or your clients. You can pop in there, and it's more casual. And also when you do the breakout sessions in the weekly one, the instructors pop around to the little mini groups as well. So if you're struggling or have questions, one of them will probably pop in there. So
Yeah, awesome.
if that helps.
Thank you. Keisha.
Yeah, real quick. I thought it was incredibly awesome, and it really set me up for success. And part of the reason why is because that last, I'm going to become a board certified health and wellness coach, and those last couple months to do that piece, to prepare for that piece, you actually do a couple of one-on-ones, about 3 one-on-ones with one of the coaches, and you go through you know all of the parts of actually doing a coaching call. So that really helped. I use it today, in my coaching calls. It has made the difference in my clients' lives. And even my husband is a doctor. He's a lifestyle medicine physician, and he is just like, "Oh my gosh, Keisha, you're amazing." And so he's not a coach, but he's very smart, very brilliant man. And so he brings that piece, and he just is like, take over, just you got this. And so it really sets you up for success. And
You heard it here first. Level 2 improves marriages, which is true. Like we have heard that many, many times. Improves marriages and parents.
I'm signing up. No.
All the things. And I think I also want to kind of point out, because in these calls, we obviously are most of you are coaches. I like to do what I call meta coaching, is like in the middle of a conversation to zoom out. And this is one example of why testimonials are powerful, because you notice what Miriam said. Miriam said, "You guys are selling this thing. Can you tell me more about it?" And I said, "No, let me show you. Let's ask people who have done it." This is what testimonials do for our work, right? Like when we are coaches, it's this like, look at what these folks were able to achieve, or how they found the experience. And Miriam, do you feel how like probably more relatable this was to like trying to kind of make this decision for you, right? Because I could have told you about level 2, and so could Jer, we're both big fans. We both went through the very first cohort that existed. And I can say that it's been the best thing I've done educationally, apart from my 2 psychology degrees. But like how much more powerful it is to hear like the peers to say that really have no conflict of interest, right? Like to recommend that same thing.
Wonderful. Thanks everybody for your input. Very helpful.
Yeah, lots of love in the comments for level 2 as well. So Miriam, we hope we'll see you in level 2, is all I have to say. And it's that time for us all. So I want to say thank you for being part of the inaugural Coaches Connect, and I hope I will see you all next week.